Hey guys, welcome to today's episode of Talking Decon. To my left here, I've got our director of marketing.
Hi, guys.
You guys already know him, Steve Miller. And to my right here, our content creator, Mariah Watts. Thanks for joining us today, guys. And you've got a case today. We want to hear about it.
Yes, I'm super excited to talk about this case. So the case we're talking about today involves 11 murders, and a total of 4 people were arrested and charged for these murders.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it's a crew. We're working with a murderous crew.
Whoa.
These murders involve torture, social security fraud, and even a bit of cannibalism, which after I read back what I wrote here, I'm like, torture, then social security fraud, then cannibalism. I got to rewrite.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, you kind of like bypassed everything. Like you just kind of like skipped over that. Like
Usually-
it was like.
Yeah.
Usually when you see some type of like fraud type stuff, you rarely see anything violent.
Yeah, so I think that like it's going to be interesting when we talk about the motives and what they went through and how they did this stuff. Like, I get the sense that the social security fraud was just like an added bonus. Like, we're going to do this, but we can also go ahead and make a couple bucks on the side as well. So, but we'll talk about motive and stuff because it is a little bit opaque. It's not totally clear as to the motive. So, this case was actually recommended by a viewer, Yolande Morgan. So, shout out to Yolande.
Whoop, whoop.
Appreciate it. So, what we're talking about today is the Snowtown Murders, aka the Bodies in Barrels Murders. So, the sources for this are Wikipedia, Murderpedia, and Ranker. Are the big 3 that I read through for this. So the Snowtown Murders were a series of murders committed by a gang of miscreants that were led by John Bunting, right? He was their ringleader. The murders were committed between August of 1992 and May of 1999 in and around Adelaide, South Australia. So this is an Australian case.
Okay, because I was going to say Snowtown and what time of year was this?
I
but
thought he was going to
like
say
August.
Chicago, North Dakota.
Sure. Yeah, right? Like, no, but I don't think it's actually
So
snowy
they have
at all.
I was going to say, do they have a winner? I'm stupid.
I'm
Australia.
stupid as well.
Isn't there summertime?
I'm sure somebody in the comments will yell at us about
somebody will
whether
go,
or not the
stupid Americans who don't know our holidays.
We're from Florida, so we don't understand winter
we don't
in
understand
general.
winter to begin with.
Yeah.
What is this thing called snow?
The only thing I know about winter is occasionally I have to go out and put a blanket around an orange tree.
There you go.
That's about all my
That's all we
understanding
know.
of winter
Low-key
as
fun
a
fact,
Floridian.
first time I saw snow, I thought there was a fire nearby. So I thought there was soot in the air.
Oh, so you thought it was ash?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I could see how you would do that.
yeah, I was like, what's
The only
going
good thing for
on?
snow I've heard is to pee in it and like spell your name or
That
something.
is fun. Yeah, you get artistic with it.
Yeah. Other than that, it's absolutely useless to me.
Should be useless for everybody. The subsequent trial was one of the longest and most publicized in Australian legal history. And to be clear, only one of the victims was actually killed in Snowtown, right? So they were all killed in different locations. They were killed in different places. However, 8 of the bodies were found in plastic barrels in an abandoned bank vault in Snowtown.
In a bank vault.
Yeah, so an
I gotta
abandoned
hear
bank
this
vault.
story.
Yeah, for sure,
this
right?
Is up already.
So the ringleader of this whole thing is Bunting, and all the murders, all the victims were all known to these people already, which is always sort of, I don't know why that freaks me out even more. Like I'm already paranoid enough. But under the instruction of Bunting, the group would prey upon the weak so they could steal their welfare payments. We're talking about Social Security payments. And they're also going to be, to be clear, there's going to be a lot of names in this story.
Okay.
All right.
We gotta follow this.
Yeah. So it's tough. And some of these names aren't exactly easy. So we'll get into that. So I apologize if I'm butchering somebody's name that's similar to this one. I'm going to do my best. Also, some of the accomplices become some of the murdered. So there's a lot of crossover.
Holy shit.
There's a lot of crossover and it gets a little bit confusing. So I'll do my best.
Tricky Australian.
Yes. I'll do my best to try to keep everything as clear as possible. So Bunting was absolutely the ringleader of this. And he was characterized as a good listener. He was very talkative and talented at listening to people and was great at getting into
So he
deep
was a
conversations.
therapist.
Exactly, for sure. But he was able to use this to forge really solid connections with people. And then he starts using those connections to start manipulating people into doing things that he wanted them to do.
So you have to watch out for charismatic people, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Like yourself.
Oh.
See, this is not the first time that I've been accused
Yikes.
possible serial killer on this. Yes. And not too surprising, as a child, Bunting was abused himself. At 8 years old, he was brutally beaten and sexually assaulted by his friend's older brother.
Oh.
So after this, as he's growing up a little bit, Bunting took to harming animals. He killed a friend's dog. He would kill and skin cats. And then later, when he was working at a meat company, he would brag about how much he enjoyed slaughtering animals.
Oh my gosh.
And when I first read that, I thought, like, well, shouldn't somebody call somebody?
Yeah.
Like, I
Red
really
flag.
enjoy slaughtering animals.
Red flag.
But he was working at a meat company.
Shocking.
So I don't know if it's like a boy, he really likes his job.
Yeah.
He's really good at his
Yeah.
job.
He's even doing it on his spare time.
Yeah, listen to the way he talks about it. He's very passionate. So I mentioned before that the motivation was a little bit unclear. However, they really targeted victims that they believed were pedophiles. They also targeted homosexuals and anybody that they thought was, quote, weak. Most of the victims were friends or acquaintances, as I mentioned. Others were relatives, sometimes living in the same house as one of the killers. Others were briefly befriended and drawn into the group. So they would find and target people and become friends with them only to then later murder them and to satiate their appetite. And as we talk about the timeline of this, you'll see it escalate too.
Okay.
The first murder, and then there'll be a year or two, and then another 18 months, and then it becomes month after month.
I've always wondered how a guy like that, okay, he's charismatic, he can talk to people. Mm-hmm. How do you go about, it's one thing to have a conversation. Hey, you like the beach? I like the beach too. Let's go on this weekend. How do you say, hey, I really want to kill somebody. Want to join me?
I just don't get it.
That seems like a really big jump.
It's a huge leap.
Yeah.
It is a massive leap.
Well, if you kind of think about it, cult leaders are able to manipulate people into following them into, drink the Kool-Aid.
But you've got to have a predisposition for that.
I feel
if you came to me and said, hey, I really think we should, go dig ditches in Ethiopia, I'm going to be like, have fun, man.
Enjoy. Sounds like a good plan for you.
Yeah, that's good for you. I'm not into that.
Maybe they were weak-minded.
But see, that's what we need to get into. Yeah. How do they find people like that?
So it's interesting that you brought up cults, we're talking about cults, because that's what sort of went through my head where I'm like, oh, this is like a cult. This guy has a cult. But nowhere in anything that I read did anybody use that word or that terminology. And I was asking myself why that would be. And I'm wondering if it's because there's no religious dogma attached to it. Mm-hmm. That nobody saw him as the savior. He wasn't preaching anything. He wasn't promising salvation or anything. So I don't know if that's the reason why it wouldn't become a cult. Because even Manson, he had his helter-skelter. There's going to be a race war. There was a mythology and an ideology around it. But that doesn't seem to be the case with him. So I guess maybe that's the reason. But to me, it sounds like that because he... charismatic leader that gets a couple of followers and convinces them to help him out with murder,
Yeah. So I want to hear basically how did he meet these people and how did he get them on board?
Yeah, we'll get into a little bit of that.
Yeah.
A little bit of that for sure. So I mentioned before, although there was a total of $97,000 obtained through Social Security and welfare fraud as they murdered these people, they don't believe that was the primary motive for the killings. So the stated primary motive for these guys was that they were killing pedophiles. That was a thing, which sort of, makes sense with Bunting being abused younger, and in fact, on the stand at the end, when one of the murderers was convicted, he said, hey, there are pedophiles out there. I felt like I was doing what I needed to do. Yeah. But to be clear, there is one that I think to me reads like a pedophile, but most of the other ones don't.
Yeah.
So it becomes, hurt people type of thing.
Sure.
So you start seeing things. So we talk about you start seeing pedophiles or maybe there's not pedophiles. And a great example of this is Bunting, because on his wall in one of his rooms, he had what he called his rock spider wall. So rock spiders in Australia, it's a term for pedophiles.
Oh.
And he also, Bunting would refer to homosexuals as rock spiders as well. So what he had this chart on his wall created using paper notes and wool, and he had an interconnected web of names. So to me, it reads like that crazy conspiracy theorist type person.
Is he getting these names off the news? So-and-so just got charged with pedophilia?
No, there don't seem to be any real basis for it. There doesn't seem to be any, and we'll get into it a little bit here, but, and then he would use this wall and at times randomly call people from the wall and insinuate that they were pedophiles and they were going to get what's coming to them. So I read a few different sources, and when they all talked about this wall, that he had this chart, but none of them talked about what names were actually on it or where he found these names.
Okay.
I was going to say, because I feel like some of them might have identified as LGBTQ, and he was just slapping the pedophile on them.
Yeah, there does seem to be a little bit of that, for sure happening. And and if you put enough names on the wall, maybe one of them actually was a pedophile. I don't know, but it's,
It sounds like it's all based on the revenge of what happened to him.
Absolutely.
When he was a kid.
Yeah.
Did that ever come to fruition, or did he keep his mouth shut after that incident happened? Or
there is nothing about anything happening to that. So I get the feeling, I get the vibe that he kept his mouth shut about it.
And then it just came out when
okay. It's like he's getting revenge over and over again for that wrong that was done to him, So his first victim was Clinton Trezise, Trezise, Trezise. I'll go with Trezise.
Okay. Sounds good.
And this is in 1992.
Okay.
So that's when he began his spree in August of 1992. So he invited Clinton. I'm going to go with his first name because I can actually pronounce it.
Yeah.
He invited him over for a social visit. Hey, come hang out. And then he beat his head in with a shovel.
So he knew the guy.
They knew each other. They were friendly, but friendly is probably not the right word. Bunting had accused him of being a pedophile and referred to him in conversations after the murders as Happy Pants. But to be clear, there is no actual evidence that he was a pedophile at all.
Right.
That didn't exist. So he buried Clinton, and that guy's body wasn't found for 2 years. So this is in 1992, and it would be another 3 years before he killed again. Which I thought was super interesting, right? Because it's a pretty big gap. So this Clinton's murder actually remained unsolved for a long time, and it wasn't even solved until after the fact, until after he got caught for all these other ones. But in 1997, it was the subject of 2 episodes of Australia's Most Wanted. So it was known, it was a case that was out there, and nobody knew what it was, and people were talking about it. And in fact, Bunting was watching that episode with a friend of his, James Vlasakis. I'm sure I'm murdering that name. Murder, probably not the right term for here. He's watching the episode with James V. And his mother, right? And James's mother. And he boasted that was my handiwork, that he had done it, right? So we start talking about how do you start telling people that you've done this? How do you start bringing people in? It's like you befriend somebody, you know them, and you're like, hey, you know what? I actually did that.
They probably thought he was kidding, though, right?
They may have. Well, soon they didn't because he was committing murders with them. After that. So, and he said that, and he even told him, I murdered that guy and then I disposed of his body with Robert Wagner and Barry Lane. And right from the start that we see that, so right from the jump here, we start seeing that Bunting has this ability to manipulate people and get them to do things. So even though he killed Clinton by himself,
he had two other
people come and help him dispose of the body. Now I want you to remember these names, Robert Wagner and Barry Lane, right? Okay. So especially Barry Lane. Robert Wagner goes on to be an accomplice with him for the rest of all the crimes. And I mentioned that there was a guy who at his sentencing said, I did what I did and I'm fine. There were pedophiles out there. Wagner was the one that said it.
Wow.
So you could kind of see, and now we'll talk about Wagner a little bit as well, because Wagner has his own issues. So, but you can kind of see, how does this happen? So Wagner had been in what reads to me, and we'll talk about it in a second, an abusive relationship from a very young age as well. So it becomes, hey, there's a pedophile down the street, and when you're dealing with your own pain processing like that, it's like, yeah, that guy.
Yeah. Totally.
So it's like
you're seeing red.
Exactly. Yeah. So this goes he flies under the radar for this. It's 3 whole years before he kills again, and then his next victim is Ray Davies. Ray was an intellectually, thank goodness for just a simple name like Ray Davies. Ray Davies was an intellectually disabled man that lived in a caravan behind a house of Susan Allen. Davies was a former lover of Allen and became a target because Allen said, had accused him of making sexual advances on his grandson. Right? So this guy's living in basically a little camper behind this woman's house.
Okay.
And then they were lovers, and she starts saying, hey, that guy made advances to my grandson. And then, now the pedophile crew is revved up okay, so this is where, his accomplice in the murder, this is the first time that Robert Wagner joins him actually in the murder, and they had been friends since 91. So Wagner and Bunting became friends in 91. This murder takes place in 95. So how do we get there? It's it's probably 4 years of, of communication and bonding and building friendship, And so Davies was murdered by Bunting and Wagner in 95 and was never reported missing. Bunting and Wagner were later seen cleaning the camper up, and then they moved it to a house where they painted it and sold it 2 months after the murder. So they kill the guy in the caravan, they clean it all up, and we know how difficult that is. And then what they did was from that point on, they started taking his welfare payments. Wow. So that's where that's where this starts. Right. They don't report him missing.
Right.
Nobody reports him missing. They start selling his property and they're cashing checks.
That happens all the time here.
Yeah. Davis's body was later recovered by police, buried in the backyard of Bunting's former home. So again, this becomes a body that isn't associated and that isn't Bunting isn't charged with until the rest of these other crimes start coming out, because we'll see here things speed up, So that was 95, the second victim. Now we jump to 97. So it's about a year and a half later. Their victim was Michael Gardner, who was an openly gay man. Mm-hmm. Bunting and Wagner murdered him in August 97. Gardner was known to the two of them because they shared a house with the friends nearby, right? So here's an openly gay guy that's just in the neighborhood living with somebody else. And Robert Wagner did not like Gardner due to his open homosexuality.
Okay.
Now, see, this next victim it's important to hang on to this thought, right? Because to me, it's a little confusing. Anyways, after Gardner's murder, Bunting had Frederick Brooks, who was the intellectually disabled son of an acquaintance, call friends of Gardner and impersonate him. So they kill him. They get this intellectually disabled guy to call up and say, hey guys, it's me. And he was requesting things like his wallet and certain identifications so they could start cashing those checks.
Right. Okay.
So they got access to all of his personal funds. His body, Michael Gardner's, was one that was found by police stored in one of the 6 drums. So now we're starting to see these bodies wind up in drums. So he wasn't found for years and years. And in fact, one of his feet had been removed so the lid of the drum could be closed.
Oh my goodness.
And something that's, I don't know if it's interesting or not. Well, I know it is interesting to me at least. These barrels were moved around before they actually wound up in that bank vault. So like anytime, they would store them someplace and they were under scrutiny. Bodies in their world or people in their world are disappearing.
Was there like no smell? Like, how did they store?
They would be stored in sheds. They're outside, and it's sort of a more rural area, is my understanding. And I apologize to any Australian right now that's writing an angry YouTube comment.
Yeah, right.
But so they were there, and they were stored with. There was some acid in there, so they were sort of decomposing the bodies as well.
Jesus.
When they discovered, so since we're talking about the bodies in the barrel, they stored them in barrels of acid. And they kept them in a shed for a while. Sometimes 2 bodies would be in a single barrel. After the dismembered bodies were stored, Bunting would often check on them to see how they were doing. So he would actually go there, open up the lids, look at them. Upon looking at the first victim, he reportedly said, "They're rotting very nicely."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he took pleasure in watching the bodies sort of decompose and fall apart inside of the barrel.
For years.
For years. Yeah, because I mean,
goodness.
Davies is killed and put into Gardner's killed and put in a barrel in 97. These guys aren't busted until 99. So this is 2 years of staring into barrels of decomposing bodies. So next we come to Barry Lane. And if you remember, I mentioned Barry Lane's name. He helped dispose of the first body, right? So Lane was an open homosexual and cross-dresser. Lane had previously been in a relationship with Robert Wagner from 85 to 96. Now, if we remember, Wagner wanted to kill Gardner because Gardner was an open homosexual.
Right.
Yet the way this is written, it says Wagner was in a relationship with Lane.
Yeah,
but now this is where it gets really difficult because Lane's relationship with Wagner began when Wagner was 13. So Lane's a grown man and he's 13.
There's the pedophilia for
exactly.
him too.
That's what I was saying. Like, so then it becomes these are 2 people that were abused because in my mind you're 13. Forget it. No way. Yeah, I don't care that the relationship continued on. That doesn't matter.
No.
That's not okay. Bunting often referred to Lane as being dirty and as a pedophile. And on the day of his murder, Lane was forced by Bunting to call his mother. And he told her he'd be moving to Queensland and that he wanted nothing to do with her anymore, right? So it becomes, they know what they're doing is wrong and they're covering their tracks ahead of time.
Right.
And we'll see this a couple times in the other murders as well. So it's like, hey, you're going to call your mom. I'm done with you, Mom. I don't want anything to do with you. I'm moving away. You're never going to hear from me again.
Oh my gosh.
So that, of course, buys in some time, And in addition, Bunting had also learned that Lane was telling others that he was involved in the murder of Clinton. So then it became, we have this witness out there that's talking about it, And he became concerned that obviously that was going to be a loose thread. So he murdered him. And after Lane's murder, Bunting assumed control of his vehicle and claimed again all of his welfare payments, And now we have a new name, Thomas Trevelyan was also involved in the murder of Lane. And a lot of these other guys claim that Bunting was only associated with Lane to gain further information about pedophiles in the area. So they used him to try to identify other pedophiles. Lane's dismembered body was found in the drum bank in Snowden, along with Michael Gardner, that victim that we just mentioned.
Right.
So it's like you see how complicated and how convoluted this
Right.
is. Like there is, in my opinion, a pedophile in the midst. I think that if you want to be very technical, like pedophilia is a little bit younger. I think they call it hemophile or something like that for teenagers. But whatever, for me, it's fine.
Yeah.
Pedophile, it's
Yeah.
fucking sexual
Right.
deviancy.
That's with kids, so
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it gets really complicated now. Like this Wagner guy was in a relationship, which is what a couple sources were calling a relationship, which to me seems, it can be a relationship. It's obviously a very negative one, So
So did Wagner have the idea then to kill him?
yeah. So
okay.
yeah.
Wow.
So then we just mentioned that, Thomas Trevelyan was involved in the murder of Lane. Mm-hmm. So their next victim in November of 97 is Thomas Trevelyan.
Oh my God.
Yeah. By the way.
So now they're killing their own.
Yeah. By the way, so Barry Lane is killed October. So I want to back up just a second. Michael Gardner is killed August 1997. Barry Lane, October 1997. Thomas Trevelyan, November 1997.
Oh, wow.
So we're
They
starting
were
to
on a
see,
roll.
like before it was like a 3-year pause, then a year and a
Right.
half pause. Now they're getting going. Trevelyan was described as having heavy psychiatric problems. He only wore army-style clothing. He would at times run outside his house with a knife if he heard an unfamiliar sound. So when I'm reading this, and they're trying to make it out like he has psychiatric problems, so he wears Army Navy clothes, whatever.
Yeah.
If you hear an unfamiliar sound, it's not crazy to go outside and look around your house with a knife.
Exactly.
Like that to me doesn't, And then the other thing that was odd to me was it said he was known to regularly travel long distances on foot. I don't understand.
I take long walks.
Yeah. Like I'm reading this is like when they said, oh, he was known to have heavy psychiatric problems. I'm like, oh, I thought they were going to talk about bipolar or schizophrenia or something. But they're like, he wore Army Navy clothes and liked to go for walks. It's like, well.
Yeah, in America, they call that exercise. They don't do a lot of it here. I know. Mostly we take
right?
buses and
yeah,
cars.
Yeah, like in America, we'd be like, that person's walking.
Holy shit, he walked a mile. Oh my God, he's crazy.
Yeah, so I'm not sure why they included these notes about, like to me, that's like, I read that from a source and I included it just for the sheer purpose of why.
Exactly.
How is this a description of a psychiatric problem? It just sounds like all my friends from high school. I like knives, Army, Navy clothing, going for
Exactly.
walk. Yeah, cool.
That
yeah, for
sounds
sure.
pretty
Let's
teenagerish.
hang out and go smoke cloves.
Yeah.
He actually shared a home for Barry Lane for a period of time from April to October of 97. Like I mentioned, Trevelyan assisted Bunting and Wagner in the murder of Lane, and Bunting murdered Trevelyan because he found out that he was talking about his involvement with Lane's murder. So again, it becomes this guy's got loose lips. We got to keep him quiet. But his excuse was he started telling people that Bunting had started telling people that Trevelyan was fucked up and he was going mental and that he was going to be a risk. So he drove Trevelyan out to the Adelaide Hills, and Bunting and Wagner forced him to stand on a box, and they fastened a noose and put it around his neck.
Oh my gosh.
And then they kicked the box out from underneath him. So the police found him, and they initially listed him as a suicide until they got busted for all the other ones, and then it came out. Yeah.
So they left that body out in the open.
Yeah, they left that one out there, just swinging in the breeze.
Wow.
Yeah. So then their sixth victim is April of '98. So they take a little bit of a pause there again. Gavin Porter, 31, was a friend of James Vlasakis, James V, who we mentioned earlier. Vlasakis, along with his mother and half brother, lived with Bunting. Porter moved into the house shared by Bunting and the V's in '98. Bunting referred to Porter as a heroin addict and a waste, and basically like just he's this, so now we like in my mind this is like really when these guys go around saying we're only killing pedophiles, they didn't like this guy.
Yeah.
They didn't like, and he sounds like he was a junkie, and something did happen that understandably angered Bunting. He was pricked by a used syringe that Porter had left on the sofa.
Oh.
So you have every right to be
Yeah,
pissed off
I'd
at
be
that.
pissed.
I'm not saying that you can't be pissed off at that. But this whole like noble pursuit of we're killing pedophiles, you guys are just
Yeah.
Now you're
murderers.
just killing people who
Yeah.
piss you off.
Exactly.
Yeah, the slightest inconvenience at this point.
Yeah. So Bunting and Wagner murdered Porter while he was sleeping in the car in the driveway, which that sentence sounded really bizarre to me.
Yeah.
It's like you can't get into the house, but I guess if you're a heroin addict, you sort of fall asleep wherever.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Porter's body was stored in a barrel, and then eventually was one in the barrel found at Snowtown. And then in August of '98, so taking again a couple months pause, victim 7 was Troy Yode, Youde. He was a half brother of Velasquez.
Wow.
I know I'm murdering that name, guys, by the way. I really apologize. And Velasquez had earlier confided to Bunting that Yode had molested him when he was younger.
Jesus.
Yeah. So in August of '98, Bunting, Wagner, Velasquez, and Hayden, which is a name that is very disturbing. That's going to come up here in a couple of murders. His name is Mark Hayden, and he was arrested and went down for this as well. But this is the first time we see his name in one of these murders. They all visited Yode. Bunting, Wagner, and Velasquez dragged him from his bed and murdered him. Yode's body was dismembered and stored in a barrel, and then later moved to Snowtown. So again, this could be pedophile related. Like if we take Velasquez at his word that he was molested by the guy, and obviously we know vigilante justice isn't okay, but these people are unbalanced. I don't know if it's okay for them to just be saying this person did this person did that. And
Well, yeah, at some point you wonder, are they just saying that? Or
right.
I think there's quite a bit of statistics about women who get, sexually molested, it's like 1 in 4 or something. It's really high. But I don't think we can pinpoint boys because they're not as forthright with the information.
Right.
So to see a small group like that and they're saying they all have that in common, that's scary.
3 of the 4, right?
Exactly.
3 of the 4. It's heavy, man.
Right.
It's a real issue. It's a real problem.
It absolutely is. And it's sad that they feel like that they can't say anything.
Yeah. Which is nice. I feel like in this society we're starting to loosen up more with that
Yeah,
stuff,
I
and
hope
people are
so.
starting to have that
I
conversation.
feel like it's like some type of honor culture, like men can't be victims
Sure.
at all. Yeah, like
which is horrible.
Yeah, and you
it
hear that
seems
said
bad.
men can't be raped. It's like, no, you can't. Anybody
Yeah.
can be.
Absolutely.
It probably happens less, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And when
Yep.
you go around saying that stuff, it just makes it more difficult for people to come out and be open
course.
about it.
It
you know?
devalues that.
And then
Yeah.
you have cases like this.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, the trauma just.
So if you guys remember Frederick Brooks, the intellectually disabled guy that
Right.
made the call pretending to be the other guy, well, they killed him
Jesus Christ.
in September of '98, which is 1 month
Just for the
after.
hell of it for him?
I couldn't find a reason for him, but I do know that they started taking his welfare payments.
Oh, okay.
So that's victim number 8. Victim number
Must be
9.
pretty easy to cash these checks then.
I'm
Don't
telling you,
have to
man.
look like the person.
I
on the
would have
ID?
this blew my mind
Yeah.
because this is the 90s,
Right,
right?
it's
Like
not
I
that
remember the
far.
90s,
Yeah.
like back like in the 20s and the 30s where it's like you show up and you just write a check on a brown paper bag.
Right.
You're like, I'll honor that IOU. You know,
Right.
that's not the case here. Like there are IDs, there are systems. So I don't know if it's direct deposit and they just got access to all their accounts. I'm not sure exactly how that fraud played out, but it is wild to me that it played out for years, So
different in Australia than it is here. Like how
I don't think it's that different
You know?
in Australia. I mean, it's got to be different. It's a different country. It's a different place. But, I mean, it's still a developed nation,
Very much so.
Yeah. Like if we were talking about from the U.S. to Cambodia or Nicaragua, I'd be like, all right, like maybe the banking systems are different. But, So then in October 98, their 9th victim is Gary O'Dwyer. Gary O'Dwyer, again, an intellectually disabled man who lived alone. His injuries and disabilities are actually stemmed from a car accident. And this is another case where it's like they identified him as being, a weak person, and they started digging into him and realized that he had no family. So they murdered him and took over his welfare payments.
So they thought kind of easy
That's
guy
it.
to get his
Exactly.
type thing.
I can
now,
get this
were
money.
these guys on welfare or were they like disability or was it?
So
more
they're
Social
saying a lot of
Security?
this is listing as welfare, but it sounds like to me what we would call disability.
That's what it sounds like.
like SSI.
SSI for us.
is what it sounds like to me. So apologies if we're if I'm interchanging some terms there. Again, O'Dwyer's body was found in the bank vault in one of the barrels. His body contained burn marks, which were inflicted using a Variac machine to apply electric shocks. So I had to look up what that was. I wasn't very familiar with it. So some people use Variacs to bring long dormant electronic equipment back to life gradually. So it sounds like it pushes out a fair amount of electricity, and they're used to power up old radios or amplifiers, and they're used for hot wire cutting of styrofoam.
So are
among
these
other
like
things.
clamps or are these like the things that resuscitate our
No, not
heart?
like that. I think it's it's like just like a little attachment is what I looked at. It looked like it's like a little point, like you would touch it to something, and it would pump electricity into it.
Okay.
And so like what went through my mind, the one that really sold it for me was when it talked about hot wire cutting of styrofoam. So it's some sort of edge
I've
that
seen
you're able
those.
to cut and craft things. So
Right.
all the other stuff, I was like, I'm not sure exactly how to explain. It powers up an old radio and amplifier. I'm not sure exactly, but it's the hot cutting thing that really sold it for me. And that to me too shows we're starting to escalate too. Like now we're starting to torture a little bit more. We're starting to cut these bodies up. And so yes, are they taking the money? For sure. But they're also getting some sort of pleasure. If it's just money, you put a bullet in the person's head and you move on, right?
So did he go in a barrel too?
He went in a barrel.
Jesus.
He went into
Christ,
the
we're
barrel.
collecting barrels here.
That,
Can you imagine having to dispose of those barrels?
no.
Like from a cleanup perspective? Because they're made to retain liquid,
Right.
obviously, because they deliver food in them and they're also made to retain odor.
Yeah.
So it's
How would that process work then? This is interesting because so it's body transport. Does body transport have to get them out of the barrel? I mean, that's a tricky one.
so in this case, I would assume that they would probably do autopsies if they could,
Right.
but if the body was completely liquefied and dissolved, they would have to kind of remove the bones to be able to identify them.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to incinerate or autoclave the barrels.
What's the with the acid? Can that just go? How do you dispose of acid? That's
a separate disposal, because I would assume the acid was the type of acid to eat the flesh and stuff. So then you wonder what happens to that. Does it just dissipate after it's done its job?
Right, like how effective, like what's the shelf life of these things?
Right, like do you remember, did you guys see Breaking Bad when they tried to do that in the bathtub?
Oh, yes.
So that was, I can't remember the particular type of acid, but it was designed to just literally disintegrate the human body, and he put it in the wrong material and it went through.
Exactly.
But there was a specific type of material, and I think it's those barrels.
It might be.
That it won't go through.
It might be. And then I wonder what those barrels are actually used for.
Well,
I'm sure there's a reason.
Well, I've always told that they were, they're used on farms and they're used in chemical places. So, and I see them in food too, because we use them for our chemicals, which are not obviously acid, but there's no odor. The chemicals have an odor. You don't smell an odor to it. So, I mean, the idea of putting them in there is actually pretty genius, because you're not going to get a smell and you're not going to get any effluent leaking out, because it's designed to retain it.
And you can move them. I would imagine it's a hassle. I'm sure it's weighty, but at least you don't got it's not digging up a body.
But even if you see somebody moving, 6 barrels on a pallet, I probably wouldn't think twice about it. Especially if you're out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, they're just doing some work. They're doing something.
Maybe it's a farm. Maybe it's feed.
It's not like a rolled up carpet, because we all know if it's a rolled up carpet. Call the cops.
In there.
Exactly.
So then we start moving into the beginning of the end here, and I mentioned that Mark Hayden's name.
Yep.
So their 10th victim in November of '98, which is again a month after Gary O'Dwyer, is Elizabeth Hayden. She's the wife of Mark Hayden.
Oh snap! There's a female involved.
Yes, yeah. Okay. It's their first and only female victim.
Wow.
Contrary
to all the other ones we talk about, which is the complete
almost
opposite.
always right, exactly. So Bunting claims that she had been behaving very sexually towards them, and that meant that she was dirty and treacherous and needed to die. Right?
Which probably in normal language translates to she brushed her hair and she was actually clean and took a shower.
Exactly.
Oh my God, she's flaunting her sexuality. Yes. We must murder her.
She wore a tank top.
Did you see how she said hello to me? I mean, she so desperately wanted it.
Yeah, she totally wanted me.
Oh.
Yeah. She was found tortured and killed. And she was found tortured and killed, and she was killed in her own home before her body was eventually put into a barrel.
Mark participated?
Mark did not participate in the murder, but participated in assisting to conceal the murder.
Oh, my gosh.
When Mark was later shown his wife's remains in the barrel, he supposedly laughed and did not appear upset.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So, by the way, just as a note, Mark Hayden was not convicted of any murders, but he pled guilty to helping the serial killers dispose of the bodies.
So do you know how long they were married for?
I don't know. That's a great question. I should have looked that up. I apologize. Yeah. Quite the honeymoon period.
Yeah, just, God.
So this is where the investigation now really starts to ramp up against these guys, because Elizabeth Hayden's brother reported her missing within days of her disappearance.
Okay.
And her brother did not believe her husband's explanations for her disappearance. I can't imagine what they were.
Yeah.
And all of their all of this group seemed to contradict each other. Like, where did she go? I don't know. They all gave contradictory statements. And his brother also didn't believe that she would leave without her 2 young sons. So they had 2 kids.
Oh my goodness.
Police also found it suspicious, which I would as well, that her husband did not report her missing.
Oh.
So the brother reports her missing, and the husband's like, oh yeah, I guess.
Yeah, that would be a clue.
Probably should have. Yeah. Should I have done that?
That's like the whole Gabby Petito thing, right? Dude comes back 2 weeks later. He's like, oh yeah, she's not here.
Like, oh yeah, she went.
And he didn't even report her. Her parents did.
Right.
Like, hey, wait, man, you're back from Utah.
Without her.
Where's Gabby?
Yeah.
Oh, who?
Oh yeah, she didn't come back.
Yeah.
Talk about a red flag.
Dude, that case is nothing but red flags.
Nothing but red flags. This is just, he sunk himself right here.
Oh, for sure. So Elizabeth Hayden was closely affiliated with all of the murderers, right? So they all fell under close scrutiny once police started their investigation. So this becomes, okay, you guys have gone too far. And again, I've mentioned a couple times, but it's like, I think it's important because, we're killing pedophiles. It's like, no.
Nope.
So in their last victim, this takes place in May of 99. Elizabeth is November of 98. So I think that what happened was they're under a great deal of scrutiny. So they're like, let's slow down.
Right.
You know, like let's take a pause here.
Get our stories
Because the
straight.
first couple, I think the 3 murders before her was a murder a month for about 3 murders. And then they took a pause,
But
right?
the police are only really asking about the wife right now.
Correct.
Hayden's wife.
That's the one they're really leaning
Yeah,
on.
okay,
you know?
so
because the
that's
brother's pushing it forward, like
Exactly.
something's happening here, something's happening.
And I'm guessing this opens Pandora's box.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. So in May of 99, David Johnson was lured to a bank in Snowtown by his stepbrother, James Velasquez.
Oh
so
my
again,
God.
now we have the step,
Yep.
you know, and James was not homosexual, but Bunting would often refer to him using the F word and said that he needed to die. So he decided that this guy was gay and just was like, this guy needs to die. You
But
know?
he's luring him to the bank, so it's money is a big motivator here.
Well, this is the empty bank. This is the abandoned bank.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not bank to withdraw money for him.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
That's where the story
However, Velasquez had told Johnson that he had a computer for sale. She's like, all right, cool. Like, I'll come take a look
Yeah.
at the computer with you. Sounds good. Shortly after Johnson entered the bank building, he was grabbed by Wagner around the throat and strangled. Wagner then applied handcuffs to Johnson, and he was forced by Bunting to read a script that Bunting had earlier prepared and to provide his bank account PIN. Johnson's voice was recorded on a computer equipment with a microphone. So he's recording the script, and I believe that had something to do with the banks and the financials because Wagner and then Velasquez then drove and attempted to access Johnson's bank account, leaving Bunting and Hayden with Johnson in the disused bank. Wagner and Velasquez were unsuccessful in withdrawing funds, and by the time they returned, Johnson was dead. Right? So I believe that, you know, that was it. Like you talk, it was money.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they're
It
doing.
sounds
They're
like
deciding
they're all living off of these people's
they must be
welfare checks.
because I don't know how you're getting to work.
Do you know how
Yeah.
much
what I
money
mean?
they were
Like-
able to accumulate over the years? Like,
Yeah, so it was $92,000 was the
Which spread out
entirety
over
of
4 or 5 people is nothing.
it's
Yeah.
nothing.
Were they weren't
And
cohabitating, were they?
I don't believe so.
So
I
they
don't
all had
believe so.
separate lives and
Yeah.
business or
Interesting.
expenses.
Right, which is, and so that sort of reality is why people are like, the motive is unclear. It wasn't enough money
Right.
to kill for.
Yeah.
And you're splitting it 4 ways, you know, so it's not enough money. They're not really all pedophiles. So it's like this delusion,
Right.
you know, and maybe it is enough money. Like for me, I say that's not enough money to kill somebody, but maybe for somebody it is.
Yeah, that's
You know?
guess.
in that part of Australia, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he said it was rural. It was rural
Oh,
Australia.
Yeah. And again, please, I said that. If it's not, I'm sorry.
Basically, we're stupid Americans. We're sorry, Australia, that we are miscategorizing you. We don't shit about Australia.
I could talk to you about all the different types of pizza that America produces, New
Yes.
York style versus Chicago style
Exactly.
versus Detroit style, but I don't know
Exactly.
anything about geography.
Yeah, I know you have Aborigines and dingoes. That's about
Yep.
all I know. Right?
And midnight oil and NXS. That's the end of it
yes,
for me.
so we are really sorry how dumb we are.
So in May of 99, which is just this same month that they actually killed Johnson, the police discovered the remains of the 8 victims stored in huge barrels of acid.
Oh, so they
they found- so
discovered it. Somebody had to lead
But
them.
this was all part of the investigation. Yeah, so they're
somebody
investigating
ratted
these
out.
guys. I don't know if anybody ratted out or if they were following them. Like, so I
okay.
read, like I said, I read through 3 different articles, and none of them were like, this was, because I was looking
Okay.
for that too. What was that click that took
Snitches
them
get
from?
stitches.
Yeah, but there was one snitch.
Ooh.
Somebody
Do tell.
flips
Yeah, I
immediately,
can't
you
wait
know.
for this.
Just a couple notes here on the murders that I thought were interesting was they say that killing wasn't a stressful activity for Bunting. It was seen to be something that he actually really rather enjoyed, which is not surprising, considering the fact that he kept doing it over and over again.
Some people
So
like
it
yoga.
was
This jackass
Yeah.
likes
yeah,
to kill.
de-stress.
Yeah,
De-stress,
exactly.
yeah.
To relax.
Oh my gosh.
He would force his victims to call the murderers by regal names. So again, so they're role playing. So he's in this moment where it's like, you know, taking this power position.
Wow.
You know, like he's lording his power over people. And then he also liked to torture people while listening to music. In particular, he liked the album Throwing Copper by the band Live, which I will admit is a nice record, and I've listened to it many times. But apparently he would listen to this fairly regularly. He played tapes of that album.
Something resonated in that album.
Had to be.
Yep.
Specifically during the murder, during 3 of the murders. And they found 2 different CDs of the album were found at the crime scenes. Reports from one of the killers during the trial stated that Bunting insisted on listening to the album while killing, and that it seemed to put him at peace. Yeah, so it really just
But
calmed
there
him
wasn't
down.
really a pattern of how they killed each person.
No, the only real similarities tended to be they wound up in
In the
these
barrels,
barrels.
yeah.
Right.
You know,
because
and that's
they
just
tortured
disposal.
the woman.
Yeah.
But did they go into detail on that?
Oh, hang on a second. No, they did not. I missed something here, and
And the
I
disabled guy, they were like doing the electrocution
Yeah.
thing with
Yeah.
him. So they lacked a pattern.
right.
Most of them have a typical pattern.
True. The one thing I forgot to mention, I apologize. This is during the last murder of Johnson. Bunting and Wagner, after Johnson was found dead, they dismembered his body, they fried his flesh, and ate it.
Shut the front door.
Yeah, so that's that cannibalism I mentioned at the top. So remember a couple murders ago, the one you just brought up with the
Yes.
electrical equipment, like where it seems like they start to escalating. So this is what it is. Like, you know, now they're eating the body too.
That
So-
had to be somebody's idea of like, let's try it type thing.
Of course. But it's also like killers, from what, you know, look, I'm no criminologist, I'm no psychologist, obviously. But they tend to escalate
Yeah.
over time, right? It gets
Agreed.
more and more intricate. It gets
Right.
more and more
'Cause it probably gets
ritualistic.
boring after a
Right.
while.
They
The
keep
same
raising
thing.
the stakes.
Raise
I
the
got to
bar.
shoot more and more heroin to get off, you know? So
God.
that's that's why it's like the motives are unclear because the murder is the motive itself. There is some
Yeah.
enjoyment. So it's not enough to kill him in the beginning. Now we're starting to torture him, and then the torture isn't enough. So now,
Cannibalism.
what's even more deviant? Like, if he eats some
Did
of
they
it.
all like participate?
It
in
only
the
lists two of
cannibalism?
them, Bunting and Wagner, and those were the main two guys that
were,
really,
yeah.
you know. So
Did they
they're the ones.
kind of talk about that when they after everything was said and done? Like,
Not that I read. Not that I
Okay.
read. Like, you know,
I'm interested in what leads a human being to that point.
sure, of course, you know.
That's a I'm assuming you've seen that movie like Alive and stuff, and where that plane crashes and you're in the middle of
Yeah,
freezing
sand is
weather.
mountains, yeah.
and your only way to survive is to eat these people, and that was a huge hurdle for those people to do that. But to make a conscious decision and not only eat it, but you actually prepared it. 'Cause
Yeah.
you said they
They fried it up.
it up and then ate the human being. That's just I can't comprehend that.
Right. It doesn't make and again, that's what, like, we at the start of this conversation we're talking about cults and ideology, and like there doesn't seem to be any of that, because I could
No.
like, not that I could understand it, but I could see it if they're like, if we consume the flesh of this person, we'll become
Right.
stronger or whatever. But it's just like,
But there was
But
no
there's nothing.
No,
they weren't thinking
it
that.
just feels
yeah.
like
it
deviancy
was
for
like, let's just
deviancy's
try it.
sake. Yeah.
That it's just like, for me, it's like no matter how thirsty I get, I'm not gonna drink antifreeze.
Right.
And that's the leap for me. Like I can't do
No.
it.
No, like you can just walk outside this abandoned bank, and I'm sure that there's a restaurant within a mile
Right,
or so. So
exactly.
it's not hunger, it's deviancy.
it's
It's ratcheting things up.
Jesus.
It's taking things to the next level. And to be honest, because these bodies were in barrels, and because what I read through, there were fewer details about what was actually done to the bodies, which I'm making an assumption is based on the fact that
Yeah.
they were so decomposed.
Yeah.
But maybe there was other instances of cannibalism.
Well, it would be really difficult, especially because they were submerged in some acid.
Exactly.
Yeah, to
Exactly.
be able to pull it out. People think that, it's simple to come up with a lot of this stuff, and when the body is decomposed to certain levels, it's really difficult to try to figure out what happened to them before they died.
prior.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was kind of the deal?
So sure. So
Final.
it was a 12-month. It was almost a 12-month process to actually
Jesus.
get them all trialed. Wagner was sentenced to 10 consecutive. Or excuse me, I apologize. At the end of the trial, the last one was 12 months. The justice, which I believe is what they call their judge down there, so determined that Bunting was the ringleader, and they sentenced him to 11 consecutive terms of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
Here we go again with the
Yeah.
11 life sentences.
Yeah.
It's like, come on,
What's that
people.
even mean?
Yeah, that's
How long is a human life?
Yeah,
Right. But at least no possibility of parole. Wagner was sentenced to 10 consecutive terms, same conditions. Velasquez, again, sorry, sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences with a non-parole period of 26 years. Hayden was sentenced to 25 years with a non-parole period of 18 years.
Now, what were these guys in their 30s, 40s at this time, or?
I don't know. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I apologize.
So yeah, I'm wondering if the last two will see the light of day.
I can't imagine that they're ever going to get out. I just can't. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
sure, you get parole after 26 years. But what parole board's letting you out?
Well, Jesus.
Eating
Well, in
people.
America,
Well, true.
yeah, they'll be
true.
walking the streets eating at McDonald's. Are
Yeah.
you kidding?
True.
Yeah. And look, it was they never, at least Wagner and Bunting, never displayed any sort of concern. When they were calm and cold when they spoke about the victims.
Was there confessions?
No.
Oh, so
no, I don't believe there were confessions. There was one, and I apologize. I'll have to. One of them flipped on everybody and got the lesser sentence. I believe it was Velasquez. Yes, there we go. Velasquez was pretty quick to turn on the other, so he's given a slightly lesser sentence. He even said that he was sorry for what he had done, but he was the only one that actually said that.
Which really means I'm sorry I got caught.
Basically,
just to be an ultimate, just as the ultimate shithead move, Bunting was reading a book during his sentencing.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
So they're in the courtroom and he just kicks back and they're reading off his jail time and he's just like,
that is the ultimate you to the judge and the jury.
I don't even care.
Oh my god.
I don't even care. Dude. Whatever you're doing over there doesn't even affect me.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of crazy shit. That one takes the cake.
Yeah.
At your own sentencing, you might as well just dig your own grave.
Yeah, it's like he doesn't. I don't care. Like whatever.
I wonder if the death penalty wasn't even an option there.
I don't know. It can't be. Let me look it up real quick because
if anyone deserves that shit, it's him.
Yeah, it's been abolished in all jurisdictions. So yeah, capital punishment in Australia is a form of punishment that has been abolished in all jurisdictions.
Wow.
So no, but that is the type of guy where it's like, yeah, like what are we doing here? So, big thank you to Yolande. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing your name wrong as well because I pronounce every single name wrong.
And if you are Australian, we're sorry, we're not.
We just assume you drive around in kangaroos. So you sit in the pouch and you just drink Fosters and all that, and Crocodile Dundee is your president. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah. So that is the Snowtown Murders, a really bizarre.
They were neither in snow. Nor in a town.
Yeah,
exactly.
There we go. They're in a bank with no snow whatsoever.
Exactly. What the f***? You guys need to get better at your names.
I thought this was based off a movie. Or a movie was based off of this.
Was it?
Yeah.
There may have been.
Familiar. I think I saw something on Netflix.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, there is a movie based on it.
Maybe you have a VPN so you're able to get Australian Netflix. See, I need one of those. You guys need to show me how to use that.
Absolutely.
When I was in the UK, I saw shows that I was like, holy shit, why don't we get to see this? And then I realized there is a UK Netflix, a US one, and then other people. Why don't we have access to all that?
Get that VPN. You watch whatever you want to watch. Yeah.
Man.
I'm old and I don't know how to do it, so somebody teach me.
We got you.
Mariah's the young one. She's got it.
Yeah, she's got this.
Because they let me know all the time that I'm old.
I know. Yeah.
Steve asked, "What's a saweetie?"
What's a what? I don't know what that is.
Saweetie, and he meant Saweetie the rapper. So I don't know.
That's a rapper?
Yeah, apparently it's a really big rapper.
It's a girl. Saweetie. Saweetie.
Yeah.
Like Wheaties that you eat for breakfast.
Yeah, there was a...
I think it's more like Sweetie, but with some panache on it.
S.A.F.E.
This is a popular person?
Yeah, she's super popular. She had a meal at McDonald's. So
she has a meal at McDonald's?
Yeah, I don't know if there's...
How do we get a meal at McDonald's?
What
that would require us to eat first.
Do we want a meal at McDonald's?
No offense, McDonald's.
Super raw burger.
Ew.
Just
are you serious?
No, she was making up on a meal.
Jesus, I didn't even think McDonald's had actual beef.
I don't think I think it's mostly hooves.
Yeah. Or, what's that that they put in the hot dog?
I think that's what it is.
The inside of our intestines. Well, that was disgusting. Thank you for telling us about
my
your
pleasure.
cannibalism.
Yeah.
Jesus. Anyway.
Who's ready for lunch?
Oh, God.
Let's have it delivered. All right, guys. Well, hope you enjoyed today's episode of Talking Decon. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you're alerted the next time our show comes out. And don't forget to follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Crime Scene Cleaning. Have a great day.